Real quick. Muted.
Ready to go? Call the TBARTA board meeting to order. This is the August board meeting. Welcome, everyone. Rich, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic, which stands one nation, Can we call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Jim Holton,
Present.
Cliff Manuel,
Present.
Commissioner Long will not be joining us today. Mayor Castor. Here. Mayor Kreisman.
Here.
Rich McLean.
Here.
Commissioner Kemp will not be joining us. Commissioner Starkey.
Here.
Commissioner Bellamy will also not be joining. Neither will Commissioner Holcomb. Commissioner Flowers.
Here.
Secretary Gwynn.
Here.
And Secretary Nandam, we have Nicole Mills filling in today.
Here.
Okay, we may go ahead and proceed. We do have a quorum.
Thanks so much. Is there any public comment? Yep.
We do not have anybody personally to deliver public comment. However, we did receive an email from the Tampa Bay Partnership, and I would like to read that into the record now.
Please do.
This is from Rick Homans, President and CEO of the Tampa Bay Partnership. Dear Chair Holton, as the board of TBARTA convened Friday to select a preferred alternative for the Regional Rapid Transit Project, I would like to, on behalf of the Tampa Bay Partnership and its business leaders, offer a few observations and a specific recommendation. First, we want to underscore the significance of this regional transit project. This project will enable our residents to access jobs, education, and healthcare throughout Tampa Bay. Experts at the USF Muma College of Business have identified improved transit as a key driver to improve our region's low performance in poverty, income, inequality, economic mobility, unemployment, and gross regional product per capita. By advancing this project, you can take a bold step towards making Tampa Bay more competitive with our peer communities in the U.S. Second, the partnership has consistently advocated for a regional transit project that provides a relatively fast, reliable, and predictable way to connect our county transit agencies and key activities in Pasco, Hillsborough, and Pinellas counties. The Tampa Bay Partnership has funded and produced research on best practices for transit-oriented development. We have also undertaken significant research to model the impact of improved transit on access to jobs in our region, finding that the Regional Rapid Transit Project enhances job access to a greater extent than other premium transit projects underway in Tampa Bay. As you consider the numerous options for the Regional Rapid Transit, we recommend you select Alternative 8B. This alternative uses a combination of expanded, hardened, and dedicated shoulder lanes and FDOT's planned express lanes to provide the reliability and predictability the project needs to attract choice riders. Alternative 8B connects 9 activity centers in the 3 counties, and TBARTA can easily upgrade the quality of its stations and bus fleet in future years to meet the gold standard of the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy. Alternative 8B also presents a cost-effective and competitive approach to Tampa Bay's first regional premium transit project. It has a projected capital cost of $207 million with annual operating expenses of $7.66 million, giving it a cost per rider of $8.37. Guidelines for federal funding identify passenger costs of $10 or less as highly competitive. We encourage TBARTA to think creatively and aggressively when it comes to funding, and we hope that the state of Florida will play a significant role, as it has done in Central Florida and South Florida with Sunrail and Tri-Rail. The state of Florida has provided hundreds of millions of dollars of support to these sister regions as they advance their signature regional transit projects. Now it's time for the state of Florida to do the same for Tampa Bay. We can think of numerous ways by which FDOT could participate, including toll revenues from express lanes, revenue from documentary stamp tax collections, strategic intermodal system funding, and the funding infrastructure bill. We know that FDOT is considering ways in which it can play a more meaningful role in helping key Florida metro areas advance regional transit with both capital and operating costs, and we believe the regional rapid transit could provide a model example for increased state and federal funding. Finally, we want to commend the Florida Department of Transportation for its support of the Regional Rapid Transit Project, as well as WSP for its project planning and support. We want to express our gratitude to the staff and board of TBARTA for its dedication to this important work. We appreciate your consideration of a recommendation to adopt alternative 8B as the preferred alternative for the Regional Rapid Transit Project. Sincerely, Rick Homans, President and CEO, Tampa Bay Partnership.
Thanks for those comments. Are there any other public comments?
We have none at this time.
Okay, thank you. We'll close public comment and move on to our consent agenda items. Since there are several that are backed up here, I want to take these as consent as a whole one at a time. And if any board member has questions, we can pull those and discuss in detail. Otherwise, we'll get a summary review from staff on the best way to proceed. I think the April, May, and July board meeting minutes are pretty clear. So do I have a motion? Are there any corrections or additions? If not, I'll have a motion to approve those.
Move to approve.
Then a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call the roll, please, Jennifer.
Jim Holton,
Yes.
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman, Rich McLean,
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Flowers.
Yes.
Okay, motion does pass.
It's approved. Next item is the Manatee County CAC appointment. David, could you briefly refresh us on that?
The CAC has had a vacancy from Manatee County on it, and through working with Commissioner Bellamy from Manatee, he has nominated Corinne Tucker, who is a multimodal planner with the Sarasota Manatee MPO, and all CAC appointments need to be affirmed by the board. So we are bringing her name to you all this morning for consideration for the CAC.
Okay, would someone like to file make a motion to approve?
Move to approve the Tucker.
Then a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Jennifer, call the roll, please.
Jim Holton,
Yes.
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman,
Yes.
Rich McLean,
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Flowers.
The motion carries.
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you, and welcome our new appointee. Next up is the fiscal year 2020 audit. Melanie, are you going to brief us on that, or is David going to do that?
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Back in May, our auditors, Clifton Larson, presented the 2020 annual audit. Back in May, we received an unmodified opinion that states that the financial statements were fairly presented. There were no material weakness or significant deficiencies, including the internal controls over compliance. So we're just asking for the board to approve the final approval of the 2020 audit.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions from Melanie? None being heard, I'll accept a motion to approve the audit report.
Second.
Then a motion, a second. Any further discussions? Call the roll, please, Stephanie.
Jim Holton,
Yes.
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman,
Yes.
Rich McLean, Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Flowers. Motion does pass.
Thank you. Final item under consent agenda items is the amended bylaws. And Alan, are you going to address that or David? David, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. You may recall our legislative agenda during this past session involved a few items that we were asking the legislature to consider, specifically relating to what a majority is, how it's defined, and allowing a simple majority of board members to vote on items as opposed to requiring 7 affirmative votes. It also allows the 2 mayors on our board to appoint designees to represent their cities at board meetings and to vote if they're unable to attend themselves. And it also removed the CCC as a committee from underneath TBARTA. Since that time, we received a request from the Polk County Transportation Planning Organization. They have always had a required appointment to our CAC. And due to the fact that Polk County is not a member county of TBARTA, they asked if the board would consider removing that requirement for them to have a person on our CAC. So we've included some language in the updated bylaws to reflect that change as well. The statute changes were signed into law by the governor approximately a month and a half ago. However, we need to update our bylaws to reflect those changes that are now in statute.
Okay, any questions, members? None being heard, I'll accept a motion to approve the amended bylaws.
Move approval. Second.
Been a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Jim Holton,
Yes?
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman,
Yes.
Rich McLean, Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Flowers.
Okay.
Motion does pass.
Thank you. That concludes our consent agenda items. Thanks for moving those so quickly. We now turn to discussion and our action items. Before we do that, I would like to recognize Bill Roberts to give the CAC report that he was unable to do in our prior meetings. So Bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Holton. It's a pleasure to be before you and the board this morning. I apologize for not being able to join the Zoom meeting at your last board meeting. In the interest of time, I want to recap the more important actions taken at the June meeting of your Citizens Advisory Committee. At that meeting, at which a quorum was present, the CAC approved revisions to the bylaws of the CAC, and the committee agreed to meet more frequently for the remainder of 2021. Meetings will now be held each month, and we will not be skipping a month. The committee also heard a briefing on the TD Tampa Bay, and a motion was unanimously passed to ask your board to take all necessary steps to receive additional funding, because this is a regional project that serves a vulnerable population in the region. The CAC in June heard an update from WSP on the various options for the Regional Rapid Transit Project. After considerable discussion, the CAC passed a motion recommending that this board adopt a plan to, and I'll quote, start with alternate 6A due to future convertibility and move to alternate 8C or better as each phase becomes available. That motion passed the CAC 7-2, of which I was one of the no votes. And I want the board to know that I voted that way, not to slow the project, but because I think alternate 8B should be the identified objective. And I am encouraged by the support this alternative has received from the Tampa Bay Partnership. This concludes my report. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for the report, Bill. Members, any questions for Bill? None being heard. Thank you for that report and your great work. Sorry we had to wait this long to get the report out.
Yeah.
Now that we have new voting rules, hopefully we can hear these in a more timely fashion.
Be happy to do those in person when we can.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much. First order under the topic 5 is the fiscal year 2022 budget, and the chair recognizes Melanie Williams for that.
Good morning. So last month in July, we presented the FY 2022 draft budget to the Finance Committee for review and discussion. Today, we are requesting the board for approval of the FY 2022 budget. During the Finance Committee last month, there were no changes to the budget. However, there was a discussion on having a strategic plan meeting, which we included the cost of that included in the budget. We have budgeted $3.8 million for expenditure for FY 2022. This is $3.1 million less than the current year's budget. Some of the key highlights included in the budget is the continuation of the commuter assistance program that assumes increased participation in the van food program, completion of the project development and environmental study for the 41-mile BRT, completion of the Pinellas Area Gondola Feasibility Study, and the US 19 BRT study funded by the FTA Section 5307 grant, which is a discussion item on today's agenda. The local county contributions will remain the same to establish an operating reserve, and the revenues will exceed expenses by $385,000, allowing for a 36-day operating reserve. And that concludes the highlights. So we're requesting the board to approve the FY 2022 budget.
Thank you for that great report, Melanie. Members, questions for Melanie regarding the budget proposal? Okay, none being heard, I'll accept the motion to approve the 2022 budget.
So moved.
Second.
So a motion, a second. Any further discussion? None being heard, please call the roll, Jennifer.
Tim Holton,
Yes?
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman,
Yes.
Rich McLean,
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Flowers.
Yes.
Okay, motion does pass.
Thanks so much. And Melanie, thanks for the great work your office is doing with this regard. Next up is the BMO Annual Performance Review, and the chair recognizes David Green for that report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is another item that we discussed during the Finance Committee last month as well, related to the legal services agreement that we have with Bryant Miller Olive. That contract was awarded in August of 2018. And the contract states that prior to August of each year, the board needs to review BMO's performance and compensation. BMO has requested an increase of $5 per hour for attorneys performing general counsel services, which would increase their rate from $250 an hour to $255 an hour. Everything else that's identified in the action item in your packet, those other rates for the other positions, all would remain the same. The proposed increase is included in the budget that you all just approved, and staff is fully satisfied with BMO's performance. So we are recommending that the board continue the professional legal services agreement with BMO and approve an increase of the $5 per hour for attorneys effective August 1st.
Thank you, David. Members, questions? I am very comfortable. This is a fair and equitable increase, and would wholeheartedly support it. So no other questions or comments. I'll accept the motion to approve.
Second.
The motion to approve. Any further discussion? None being heard. Jennifer, call the roll, please.
Tim Holton,
Yes?
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman,
Yes.
Rich McLean, Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
Commissioner Flowers.
Yes.
Okay, motion does pass.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next item is the RT locally preferred alternative, and the chair recognizes Brian for that report.
So we are at an important milestone in the regional rapid transit study, which is the selection of the locally preferred alternative. Chris, if you go to the next slide. This is the purpose of the RRT. You've seen this slide many times before, but what we are trying to accomplish with the RRT is all-day modern mobility that provides quick, safe, reliable, frequent, and regional rapid service. Next slide. Before I get to the slides of the 4 alternatives that are up for your consideration, I want to just do a brief recap of how we got to these 4, because it's been a long and winding road, and we've gone through several iterations of alternatives. We first sought approval of the locally preferred alternative back in January. And the 3 alternatives that we presented at the time were, first, there was a baseline express bus in mixed traffic alternative. That was the first one. The second one was what we called a mid-level investment, where this was freeway BRT lanes for almost the entire route, except for the Howard Franklin Bridge, where the bus would be operating in the express lanes. And then the third alternative was what we called the high-level investment, which added those freeway BRT lanes even to the Howard Franklin Bridge. Those were the 3. No vote was taken in January because we did not have a quorum. So we came back in February, we presented those 3 alternatives again. And again, the staff recommendation was that mid-level investment. Because of the opposition that was expressed by Commissioner Kemp, the board asked staff to go back and develop an express bus and express lane alternative that was based on a 2015 Tampa Bay Express plan. So we did that. In April, we presented 2 express bus and express lane alternatives. One alternative assumed express bus and express lanes from downtown St. Pete to the Howard Franklin Bridge, and then in mixed traffic from West Shore to Wesley Chapel. The second alternative assumed express bus and express lanes from downtown St. Pete to downtown Tampa, and then in mixed traffic from downtown Tampa up to Wesley Chapel. Both of those alternatives assumed 6 stations, because that's what the 2015 plan assumed. In addition to those 2 express bus and express lane alternatives, we also came back with a third alternative, which was that mid-level investment that I spoke of before, only now, instead of 13 stations, just 6. The board did not take action on the LPA in April, but instead they asked us to go back and look at 2 more alternatives. And they also asked staff to meet with Commissioner Kemp and come up with an alternative that would be acceptable to Hillsborough County. So we did all of that. In May, we came back with the 4 alternatives. Chris, if you could advance to the next slide, that you see here. We did not have a quorum in May or July. That brings us to today. So I want to recap what these 4 alternatives are that are up for your consideration today. The first thing I want to point out is that in all 4 of these alternatives, the number of Hillsborough County stations is limited to 3: West Shore, downtown Tampa, and the USF area. In terms of the alignment, let me explain. Hopefully you can see the various colors on the map here. I want to explain them. What you see in green represents tolled express lanes. The light blue is mixed traffic, and the purple represents those dedicated freeway BRT lanes on the right side shoulder. So let's go through these one by one, starting on the left. Alternative 6A, 6 stations total. The bus would be in mixed traffic from Pasco to West Shore, and then in express lanes from the Howard Franklin Bridge to downtown St. Pete. Alternative 8A, 9 stations total. The bus would be in dedicated freeway BRT lanes from Pasco to downtown Tampa, and then in express lanes from downtown Tampa to downtown St. Pete. Alternative 8B, 9 stations total. The bus would be in a dedicated freeway BRT lane from Pasco to downtown Tampa. It would be in express lanes from downtown Tampa to the Gateway, and then back in a dedicated freeway BRT lane from the Gateway to downtown St. Pete. And then finally, alternative 8C, 9 stations total. The bus would be in mixed traffic from Pasco to Bears Avenue. From Bears to downtown Tampa, it would be in a dedicated freeway BRT lane. From downtown Tampa, the West Shore, it would be in mixed traffic. From the Howard Franklin Bridge to the Gateway, it would be in express lanes. And then it would be back in dedicated freeway BRT lanes from the Gateway to downtown St. Pete. The staff's recommendation is 8C. I'll explain more about that as we go along. If you could go to the next slide, Chris. This slide compares the capital costs of the 4 options. The top row is the total capital cost in 2020 dollars. You'll notice that the costs for 8A and 8B are considerably higher than 6A and 8C. Not all, but much of the higher cost of 8A and 8B is because operating in the express lanes through the West Shore area would require an inline station with a catwalk across the interstate to the West Shore Intermodal Center. 6A and 8C avoid the need for an inline station at West Shore. The third row is the forecasted daily ridership in 2045. You can see that the staff recommendation 8C gets almost the same amount of ridership as 8A and 8B, but at a fraction of the cost. The next 5 rows show what the federal, state, and county shares would be. We assumed 50% federal, 25% state, which is 50% of the non-federal share. That leaves 25% to be split amongst the counties. The way we divided the capital costs between the 3 counties was as follows. We put the portion from downtown St. Pete up to and including the Howard Franklin Bridge in the Pinellas pot of funding. From West Shore up through Bears was in the Hillsborough pot, and everything north of Bears we put into the Pasco pot of funding, because north of Bears, the service is really for those 2 stations in Pasco. The last thing I want to point out on this slide is with 6A. 6A would not qualify for the FTA Capital Investment Grant Program, so no federal share was assumed for 6A. If it's the board's desire to minimize the capital costs to the counties, then 8C fits the bill. That is because 8C, unlike 6A, would be eligible for those FTA dollars. Chris, if you go to the next slide. This slide compares the annual operating costs. Alternative 6A has the lowest operating cost of the 4 alternatives, but it also carries the fewest riders, which makes it the least efficient in terms of the cost per trip. We allocated the cost by county using the same geographies that were used to allocate the capital costs. So the Pinellas portion is based on the revenue miles from downtown St. Pete up to and including the Howard Franklin Bridge. The Hillsborough portion is based on the revenue miles from West Shore to Bears Avenue, and the Pasco portion is based on revenue miles north of Bears. As I stated before, 8C is the staff recommendation. And the reason for that is 8C is the one that respects Commissioner Kemp's desire that there not be a catwalk across the interstate at the West Shore Station. And it does not include a dedicated BRT lane north of Bears Avenue, which she did not see a need for. Also, 8C is the cheapest option to the counties in terms of the capital cost. Free to take any questions you have. Also with me today is Scott Pringle from WSP if there are any questions that I cannot answer.
Okay, members, questions? Brian or Scott? Yeah, Rich, you recognize.
And just double checking. Brian, am I right in saying that Commissioner Kemp was satisfied with 8C? Is that what you're saying?
Express it in so many words, but she did not. After we presented those options to her, and she did not express any objection to 8C.
Okay. And the reason I asked that question is because, as we know, Hillsborough has had the most concerns on
Yes.
the RRT, and reasonably so too. Don't get me wrong. And so I just wanted to make sure we were going down the right path
Yeah.
again to get what I would call buy-in from
Yeah.
Hillsborough County.
When we met with her, she was very grateful for us meeting for a one-on-one and giving her the presentation. She did say, like, I'm very appreciative that you've taken the effort to address my concerns. I cannot say, though, that she came right out and said, 8C is the one that I support.
Okay. And excuse me, and I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot here, but if I could hear from Secretary Gwynn and your thoughts, and you can tell me no, but I'd like to get your thoughts. And then after that, Mayor, if I could ask your thoughts also. Thank you.
So I think our thoughts are similar to what they've been all along, is that we want to support a project that will be competitive for federal funding. One of the big components of being competitive for federal funding is having the support of the agencies that are going to operate and maintain and commit to the 25% local contribution. So, we'll support whatever the region supports, as long as it's something that will be able to compete for federal funding, which is, I think, what we need to really maximize our ability to build transit in the Tampa region.
The Secretary, just a follow on, yes or no. So 8C meets that requirement if we get those organizations buy-in. Am I correct?
I hate to give this a blanket yes or no. I mean, obviously, we got to look at the final product that we're going to push forward, and we'll evaluate it as we would with any proposal. I can tell you, we did provide the state match for the Central Avenue BRT. We've committed the state match on the streetcar modernization and extension. If we get good projects, we'll support them. But I don't want to just give a blanket yes or no commitment without us going through the process.
And understand. I'm just getting a feel. Thank you.
And for the city of Tampa, one of the issues is the schedule. And I think with the federal funding, we all know that sort of slows up a project, but I think this project could not be accused of being quick anyway. But I think that would play a part for us, because our main transit project right now is the streetcar that I know Mr. Gwynn and his organization have been very, very collaborative with us and very supportive. So we would certainly support 8C, but that's the one question, is what the schedule would look like and how it would integrate and or impact our streetcar project.
Catherine, and then Mayor Price.
I have a concern for 8C. But I very much want this to go forward, but I don't know what the benefit would be to Pasco residents paying more than almost the same as Hillsborough, but they're in mixed traffic. So I don't know how to sell that to my board. That how is that different from any other bus that they're taking now? So that's why I lean towards 8B. But the price tag's big, and so that's a little scary. And so I've heard one of my commissioners say it has to be dedicated lanes or he's not voting for it. But I don't know that he's actually seen the amount that we're talking about. So I do believe sometimes you have to take a baby step and get a plan and then work towards the end goal, which I think should be 8B. But I just don't know if my fellow commissioners would pay for something when it's just the same as what they have now. So that is my concern for 8C.
Thank you. Brian, were you wanting to address specifically that issue?
Tweak 8C Commissioner Kemp's objection to the BRT lanes north of Bears was she did not see a need for Hillsborough County to pay for it. But if Pasco County was willing to pay for those BRT lanes north of Bears, then I think that could change things.
Yeah, I don't know if they're willing to pay for roads, things being built in another county. I think that the advantage to having the rapid bus is it takes people, it's less congestion on the highway in Hillsborough, which is a benefit to everybody, not just the citizens of Pasco County. I will do my best to sell whatever we come up with here today. I'm just letting you know that I think it's just going to be a harder sell for me. But I would still stick with 8B, and I always like to say swing for the fence, and if you don't get it, if you don't ask, you're never going to get it. So I would stick with 8B. And I don't know what kind of cost you're talking about if you say that. The 8C plus Pasco pays for the additional lane.
I think what I was saying was with 8C, because the bus would be in mixed traffic from Pasco to Bears Avenue. But if Pasco was insistent that they wanted there to be a dedicated bus lane north of Bears, if they were willing to have that portion of the capital cost put into the Pasco pod, that could change things.
I think we paid for it in our county from 54 to the county line. Yes.
Have you quantified that cost, what that would be for the dedicated lane? Brian, do you have any cost on that? Or Scott?
Are you asking for just a portion within Pasco County?
Well, yeah, to address Commissioner Starkey's concerns.
Yeah, Scott may be able to answer that question better than I can.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, TBARTA Board, Scott Pringle with WSP. To answer your question, I don't have the exact figure on hand today, but it's roughly between 30 and 40 million to get that dedicated lane on the outside. The big difference between 8A, 8B, and 8C is working with State Route 60 interchange to get out of the express lanes, get that station built, and do the infrastructure to egress and ingress out of the express. If I may, Mr. Chair, to answer the mayor's question as far as timing, this project is intrinsically tied to the TB Next program. So we have to follow the phases related to that program. And realistically, for this project, we're probably talking 2030 at the earliest before we can actually start service. And things like connecting, we'll have a direct connection to the Tampa Tehico streetcar, literally getting down at grade, connecting to a streetcar station. And it just benefits this project to have that in place to distribute trips in downtown Tampa.
Okay, thank you for that. I think next up was Mayor Kreisman and then Commissioner Flowers.
Can you go back one slide for a second,
Sure.
please? I think it was one slide back. Yeah, looking at the, first off, let me make this comment. This is supposed to be a regional transit, which means that we all pay. And, to go, in my mind at least, to create a dedicated lane from Pasco to Barris shouldn't be just Pasco County's obligation. Otherwise, it's not really truly regional. And I do understand why you all are taking the position there and you have the concern you have. I do think when you look at the price tag, and that's why I wanted to go back to this page, it's a significant difference right now between 8B and 8C. I don't disagree with you. 8B would be what I'd love to see too. And certainly I think having a dedicated lane from Pasco to Barris makes a lot of sense. It would be interesting to see how it would change that split. I mean, if you're talking 30 million additional, 3 government entities, I guess it takes you up to, if I'm doing math right, about 10 million each extra, which puts you at about 16, which is still less than the 21. But I think we have to take a step. And so my big question is, and I asked this when we started this about convertibility and whether this, if we went with something like 8C, do we have the ability to convert it over to get to where I think all of us would eventually like to see us get to? But at least it gives us that momentum where we're taking that step. Almost reminds me of the ferry where we started with seasonal with the intention of showing it success, building ridership to where it makes it a lot easier to justify then going to a different service that is full-time and multiple boats. This in my mind is the same thing. Let's get moving with something. And then as long as it's convertible, then we can start converting it over to where we want to see it get to.
Do you want to?
Yeah, to answer your question, Mayor Kreisman, I think we discussed this in that April timeframe. That's the wonderful thing about this partnership that we have with Secretary Gwynn in District 7 is the fact that in the TB Next program, they've got the space we need to run the service, and they're already doing things on the infrastructure side to harden it to allow us to run the service. So it's easily convertible. The biggest cost item for this project in terms of convertibility would be doing dedicated lanes between West Shore and downtown Tampa, because that's all on the project, because that's where operating the median, we got to bring in the fill, we got to deal with the structures. So that part, it's doable, but that's where the price tag.
Thank you. Commissioner Flowers, you had a question as well.
The only thing I wanted to point out that's changed a little bit,
You could hit your button there.
just for information more than anything. So, we, as we build segments of Tampa Bay Next, we're building in accommodations for a future system like this. And we recently let a project on I-275 essentially from just north of the downtown interchange to north of Hillsborough Avenue, where we will be constructing as an incidental cost to us in our project, the accommodations for this. But over our request not to, at the Hillsborough TPO TIP hearing in June, they voted to remove any improvements from Hillsborough Avenue north up to Bears from the priority list. So at some point that would have to be added back in order for us to be able to do that.
What would the logistics of that be and how much time would that?
What would have to happen is that at some point they would have to put the project back into the priority list so that it can be eligible for us to do the work and federal funds could be allocated to it. Otherwise, if the improvements were to be built without a project that we're building, then it would be a cost to the project. If it's built incidental to our project, then it can be absorbed into our project. So we made the request to leave it in the priority list, but the TPO decided to remove it from the priority.
Do we have an explanation as to why they did that, or what was their reasoning?
I don't necessarily want to speak on behalf of the TPO directly. I think part of the concern is they said there was not public support for it. They didn't specifically tie it to this TBARTA project. No one came out and said that, as I don't believe the reason. And I got Ming here with that. I mean, I don't believe they explicitly said that. I think what they said was that there was opposition in Seminole Heights and in the neighborhoods around the interstate, and that for that reason they didn't want it to be eligible to receive the priority list funding. Me?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And I think another comment was made was that it felt like the shoulder, adding the wider shoulder to the facility, it will make the facility wider, because we're looking at a 15-foot shoulder instead of a typical 10, 12-foot shoulder. So that was another comment made, and they didn't want to have a wider facility. But we had made the statement that we're not going outside of our footprint. We're not buying any more right away within the interstate footprint. But I think there was still a concern.
Well, I like to boil it down to whether it is a really practical matter. Their decision to take this out of the priority list will impede our, getting this alternative done. If we move forward and impede federal funding, I mean, this is a big issue, obviously, that just recently come up. Can anyone from DOT address that in a more cut to the chase manner? Is this going to be a deal buster?
I think it's a matter of whether it would be a project cost or not would be one item. And I'm looking at Ming, you can nod your head if I'm saying the right thing. So if it's a project cost, of course, that also brings the cost per rider up, which we're trying to compete with under $10 an hour. We try to keep under, be competitive on a price per rider. It is a CIS facility, so if we came up with a need to widen it at some point, theoretically, the department could elect to do the project. But typically, we try to work with our MPOs, and we try to make sure the MPOs approve the projects that are going to have federal funding on it. In other words, it would be much more difficult for us, and if it was in the priority list, then it is much easier to fund. It meets planning consistency. But I mean, there are times they can add this back in, but yeah, that it would make it more difficult, and it would probably be a project cost as opposed to an incidental cost. Does that pretty much summarize it, me?
Yes, sir. Because if you want to build it as part of the construction project, I think the department can help fund that transit infrastructure as part of the highway project. If you're going to wait, do it as an independent project, you all know it's going to increase the price quite a bit. So, I think that's the challenge we have. Get the tip amendment done, but at the same time, getting the system.
Cliff, you have a comment?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. So our objective is to adopt a BRT option that we believe in here on TBARTA. Hopefully we'll vote on that today. I don't think that magically makes all the issues we've been working with in the Hillsborough County area disappear. Obviously, we're going to have to get back before the TPO someday and see if we can convince the state and the TPO to support the project, because within department construction, as David just said, is a much more fiscally responsible way to prepare for this option. But our direction shouldn't be torpedoed by it, in my opinion. It's just one more of those things that we're going to have to deal with as we move forward. And then I'd also like to mention my support for Commissioner Starkey. I was kind of surprised when we went down to address the Hillsborough County issues and the crosswalks and the $207 million worth of improvements, largely focused on some improvements downtown that are very difficult to complete. That would also do away with the dedicated lanes in Pasco County that both Hernando County and Pasco County support. Agree 100% with Mayor Kreisman. We're doing regional transit projects. We're not trying to start pegging dollars on St. Pete or Tampa or Hillsborough. I mean, we're doing a regional transit project that we all participate in and fund. So my preference would be to tweak 8C to include the 30 million. That project would then be a $119 million project. I think the Barris to Wesley Chapel improvements in Pasco County ultimately paved the way for the BRT to start extending to another county that's very interested in this project north of them. So I think there's a way to move forward. I think we have some really good data in front of us. I think Commissioner Kipp had brought some concerns downtown that perhaps they don't want to deal with now that are very expensive, but we can still move forward with 8C with the dedicated lanes from Barris to Wesley Chapel, which from the math I heard today makes that total about 119 million.
I would agree with that, and let's not do out the proportional numbers that are, underneath. We can figure that out. Let's get the route and the plan, and then worry about those details as we move forward.
Members, other comments? I'll add to that my suggestion that I think 8C probably is the best choice we have on the table now. It's not the most desirable choice that we can have, but hopefully we can add to it and build upon it once we get this thing going. That's usually what happens. There are change orders and government and many things that evolve as time goes forward. But I think this is the first step that we have the best chance of getting everyone on board with.
It would be the modified 8C or the original 8C.
8C with dedicated route.
through,
We could call it 8C,
HC.
what?
and we benefit from the same.
8B?
8C, little one or something.
8C mod. I would like to see the dedicated lanes from Barris to Wesley Chapel remain.
Yeah.
And I think, that's another section where where the department's helping us. I mean, there's a lot of pluses to continuing to move forward with the department in such a good mood. And I think that's what makes this plan affordable. I could make that a motion.
That would be appropriate at this time.
And I will second that motion.
Okay, for clarity, can you just restate the motion?
Did you get your copy?
I would prefer to support alternate 8C with the addition that the dedicated lanes from Barrett's Avenue to Wesley Chapel remain in the project.
Okay, and you were proposing also the adoption of that as our preferred choice.
Yes.
Okay, there's been a motion, a second, any discussion? Oh.
No, I'm fine.
Did you get your opportunity?
Did you want to speak in discussion to this? Okay, so we have
I think Ming wants to say.
Yeah, Meng, you're recognized for discussion.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that, the motion is clear, is to direct staff to move forward, with AC plus a shoulder
The Wesley
between
Chapel.
Bears and Pasco. I mean, and 56.
Yes.
Yes.
Because, since we have a quorum here, I just want to make sure that staff and consultant team, the clear direction, what they develop, because we've been looking at this for a very long time. And I just want to make sure that Scott has clear direction on what to move forward with. Because we've been spending a lot of time and money on this thing, and we just want to have something to move forward.
I think you brought us everything we need today to make a decision, so thank you.
And you guys are clear on that?
Yeah.
Scott and Brian. Brian, you're
To
recognized.
jump in here, because since Ming used the term bus shoulder, and I want to make sure we're all clear on terms here. Because when I hear the term bus shoulder, in my mind, I'm thinking of what PSTA is doing right now, where the shoulder is just a bypass lane when traffic speeds drop below 35 miles per hour. That is not the same as the freeway BRT lane, where the bus would be in that lane all the time. And that's a little wider. That's the 15-foot hardened shoulder. So I want to be clear on what are we talking about with north of Bears Avenue? Are we talking just bustle and shoulder, like in Pinellas County, where it's just a bypass lane? Or do you want the dedicated freeway BRT lane north of Bears Avenue, where the bus would be in it all the time?
The report, I believe, was dedicated, but maybe.
That is what was in the, when I went through these alternatives, when I say dedicated freeway BRT lane,
That's the
and then
$30 million option.
those sections in the purple, that's the dedicated freeway BRT.
$30 million?
lane.
Dedicated. Yeah, so that's my motion.
Okay.
Is that the same, me?
Brian, I think it comes down to operating concept, right? So you can build infrastructure, put it in place, say, it is a 15-foot shoulder. But at the end of the day, it's operating concept that we have to develop. It's part of the next step to develop the project. To see, does it make sense to have the bus run on the shoulder full time, within that segment? Or, you can do it when it's, when the mainline speed drop under 35. Or would that preclude us from, getting federal funds if you don't run it full time? So all that, Scott will look at it, from a technical standpoint and look at eligibility criteria.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Right. There may be a time where, it becomes apparent to y'all that they should come in and out of traffic because currently the congestion's not there to need to ride the lane. But the lane needs to be designed and built with the 15 hard lane capabilities to allow you to make that decision without coming in and out by being forced from the infrastructure being substandard. That's how I think.
Correct. So everyone's clear on exactly what the motion is then. Okay, I will call the question. We've gone back to motion in a second. Any further questions or discussions? Yes, oh, yes. Is there any public comment for this question? Okay, thank you for that. That being heard, motion second. Any further discussion? Jennifer, call the roll.
Jim Holton,
Yes.
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman,
Yes.
Rich McLean,
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
Commissioner Flowers.
Yes.
Okay, congratulations. This motion has passed 7-0.
Wonderful. Good job. Yeah, Rich, you're recognized.
First, I just want to thank everybody for what I think was a fantastic conversation here. We've gone through this many times, and this one involved all of us. If you look around, everybody jumped on this and gave us their perspective, from Pinellas to Hillsborough, Pasco, even the staff and FDOT was in here talking this issue. Regional rapid transportation or just regional transportation is something we desperately need in this area here. So I'm happy we had this conversation. That was part of my drawing some folks in at the very beginning, so we can just nail this down and move forward. So hopefully, Ming, Secretary, you've got a good idea of what we're trying to do now, the staff does now, and so we can move forward and just hopefully everything works out well. But thank you again for a great conversation. Much appreciated.
Thanks for those comments, Rich. Appreciate it. Moving on, the next item is the US 19 BRT feasibility study. And Brian, you're recognized for that.
TBARTA is asking the board to authorize the executive director to issue a task work order to WSP for the US 19 Regional Rapid Transit Feasibility Study. WSP is our general services consultant. They have put together this statement of work for us for this study. The study would evaluate the feasibility of freeway BRT, basically the same concept that we're talking about for I-275, but studying the feasibility of this concept on US 19 in Pinellas and Pasco counties, going from State Road 52 in Pasco down to Almerton Road in Pinellas County, as well as including the portion of the Pinellas Gateway where the PSTA Intermodal Center is going to be. The final report would include a 10% conceptual design of the preferred alignment, preliminary station locations, a preliminary concept of operations, and preliminary capital and operating costs divided by county. The proposed fee for the study is $327,492.21. The source of the money would be our FTA Section 5307 planning funds. We have this in our FY22 draft operating budget, and I'll be happy to take any questions you have. I'm sorry. One thing I did want to ask is we had David and I, we've had conversations about this study. We've met with the executive director of Ford Pinellas, the Pasco MPO. We've met with staff from PSTA, Pasco County Public Transit, as well as District 7. All of them seem to agree that this concept, studying the RRT concept for US 19 made sense, that this would be a good candidate corridor to consider the concept.
So you're recommending a board authorization for staff to proceed along to let that study and add on to our contract?
Correct. As I mentioned, I mean, WSP, they're our general service consultant, and because of what we're studying, RRT, and because our WSP is doing the RRT study for 275, it just seems to make sense that if we're going to do this study on US 19, WSP would be the obvious consultant firm that we would want to do it.
An additional supplemental task order.
Correct. Well, it would be, this is a separate contract from the Regional Rapid Transit Study.
But if he issued it, I'm sorry.
Yep, please.
If he issued under the general consulting services contract that we completed in 60 before we started. So they're going to be working under their current relationship.
The I-275 Regional Rapid Transit Study, unless I'm mistaken, they responded to a competitive bid for that study. Under this particular study, they're doing it under the auspices of the general services contract.
What I think we're asking is there's no need for additional competitive solicitation for this because they already work for us, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
With that, I would move approval.
Second.
Motion to second. Any further discussion? None being heard. Jennifer, call the roll, please.
Jim Holton,
Yes?
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Mayor Castor.
Yes.
Did she say opposed?
No, I said yes.
Yes, okay, sorry. Mayor Kreisman,
Yes.
Rich McLean,
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Flowers.
Yes.
Okay, motion does pass.
Thank you. Our next item up is the Regional Mobility on Demand Feasibility Study, and the chair recognizes Brian Ball, Tyndall Oliver for that.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm going to share my screen. Again, Bill Ball with Tyndall Oliver. Pleased to be here representing staff on a project they would like to pursue as a task order related to regional mobility on demand. Many of you may have heard of this concept. You may have also heard it called microtransit. So I have a few slides just to kind of describe what we want to do with this particular task order. And then we'll see if you have any questions. First of all, what is mobility on demand or microtransit? It's really an innovative approach that you take advantage of the service that's out there today, the real-time data and technology to provide that door-to-door kind of mobility on demand service. Some of the key elements that are common, it's like an app-based system similar to Uber and Lyft. Usually you identify zones where you assign an appropriate number of vehicles to serve that zone. It can be commonly a first mile, last mile kind of service to get additional people to and from the core fixed routes in a system. Often it's a late night service. Most importantly, it can extend the service area to areas that aren't currently served or are underserved with existing services. I'll give you an example here. This is some work we've done with PalmTran, where we converted some of their existing services to a mobility on demand service to an area that really needs transit. It really provided the ability to fit supply with demand on a much higher quality service because it's basically on demand to door kind of service. In Palm Beach, for example, the ridership increased by 15% even during COVID with this new kind of service. It was a more cost-effective approach. And now PalmTran's in the process of adding the software as a service component, which is that app, which will allow riders to do it through their phones as well. You may have heard of the recent service in Sarasota County as well, Sarasota County Area Transit. We also worked with them recently to convert some of their fixed routes over to mobility on demand. And that was just implemented in the beginning of June. It seems to be going very well so far, but basically what it's doing, it's converting those fixed routes that weren't very productive to this mobility on demand, which is really providing a higher quality service to the customers and really giving them an opportunity to get to destinations door to door or connecting to other fixed routes in the system that are closer into the core. So what is our purpose here for regional MOD? We want to focus from a regional perspective. Is there an opportunity to close those regional gaps in transit services that are out there today? What's the demand? What's the feasibility? And can we connect more riders to the existing regional transit services that are provided by the local transit operators today? Basically, the objectives are to use the work that was already done as part of Envision 2030, look at those areas that are gaps in regional transit services today, look at that demand and feasibility, coordinate with the local transit operators to discuss those opportunities and determine, if feasible, what kind of plan we should pursue as a group in coordination with local transit operators, what we should pursue in terms of implementation and potential grant opportunities in the future if there is feasibility. So that's a high-level summary. I'll turn it over to David to talk a little bit more about what he's asking to do moving forward, but I'm also here to answer any questions that the board may have.
Mr. Chair, you may recall that I kind of mentioned this idea at the board meeting last month. Mobility on demand is an approach to transit that's gaining more and more interest throughout the country. And there are three primary uses for it. One is as a replacement for unproductive fixed routes. A second is to serve as a first mile, last mile connection. And then a third would be to provide a more cost-effective approach to serving unserved communities or underserved communities. Our interest is to see if mobility on demand could possibly be used in a regional application. We coordinated with WSP and Tyndale Oliver on a statement of work and a fee for a feasibility study to see if it might make sense here in Tampa Bay. You know, the overall concept would be to serve markets that straddle county lines and connect riders to local transit services in an adjoining county. So we would serve residents of a county and connect them to the transit provider in the county next to them, which they are unable to reach right now with such a service. The study would take 4 months to complete at a cost of $84,911 and is included in the FY22 budget that you all approved this morning. This service would be procured under the same general services contract that we'll be using for the US 19 BRT feasibility study. And our recommendation is that you all authorize me to issue a task work order to WSP for the Regional Mobility on Demand feasibility study.
Thank you. Members, questions for David? Very worthwhile idea, and I think obviously this is the thing of the future as an ancillary tool. Catherine, you have a question?
Well, I've looked at this a little bit. I think we have a study getting ready to go in Dade City, and I think this is the future. And I think it would be smart to look at it, and it's more efficient, it's more cost effective, reaches a large population that right now has no service. So I say go forward.
That motion?
The motion, a second. Any further discussion? None being heard. Call the roll, please, Jennifer.
Jim Holton,
Yes?
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman,
Yes.
Rich McLean,
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Flowers.
Yes.
Okay, motion does pass 7-0.
Thank you so much. We're on a roll today. Next up is the election for board officers, which we do every time this year. And I will turn that over to our counsel, Alan Zimmett, to run that election process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. As the chair mentioned, under your bylaws, the election of the officers is conducted every August. You elect 3 officers for a 1-year term, a chair, vice chair, and a secretary treasurer. So far, we do have nominations for the officers, and I'll take the chair office chair first. The 2 nominations for the chair are Mr. Manuel and Commissioner Flowers. So we would take any additional nominations from the floor for the position of chair. Yes, Commissioner Flowers.
Thank you for reading that. I did have a conversation with staff, Mr. Green, when he shared that someone brought my name forward. And I was very appreciative of the person that did that, whoever it was, he didn't say who it was. But one of the things I said to David, and I will share with my colleagues, I have no intention on, having any dissension, if you will, when it comes to persons wanting to serve as chair. And so having said that, because I still get to vote, I still get to come to meetings, I still have a voice. Having said that, I will remove my name because I have no interest in having a back and forth with an election. So I will remove my name at this time, and I will nominate the other individual for chair, if that's appropriate at this time.
Any other nominations for chair? If not, we'll take a motion to nominate Mr. Manuel as chair of the board for, we'll start at the next meeting for a 1-year term. Do I have such a motion?
I'll make that motion. I want to say it's been an honor serving as the U.S. chair. Done a great job. And I would nominate Cliff then to be our next chair. Oh, you made the motion? Oh, Don seconded.
We'll take that as a second.
I wanted to ask you, you said 1-year term,
Yes,
and how long were you chair?
so
Well, I was appointed for 2 years and then I was
Was
elected.
it 3 or 2?
Appointed for 2 and then
So-
elected 2 more times.
I just wanted to say that at Tampa Bay Water, it's a 2-year term. And I think that makes, I like the 2-year term idea personally.
the way that the BARTA statute reads is the initial chair was appointed for 2 years. And then thereafter, it's a 1-year term. So it's in the enabling act that created the BARTA, that it's a 1-year term.
Okay,
Certainly,
we're
the
not gonna
board-
get into that again.
The board could follow a 2-year rotation if you wish. But under the statute, you appoint for a 1-year term.
And I also have this little philosophy, it's just me. But we elected officials get to chair a lot of things. And those who are appointed by the governor serve no compensation, they give up their time freely. And so I, on a board like this, am typically supportive of someone being chair who is donating their time to serve their community like this. So, Cliff. You have my second.
So I'd like to say 2 things for y'all both. Number one, thank you. It's an honor to be considered. Chair Holton, you have done a fantastic.
Yeah.
You must do a lot of different things. Your leadership. Commissioner Flowers, I hope there wouldn't have been a back and forth. You were such a wise voice on council. We often agree on many things. So your voice continuing to light us up on key issues. Thank you for your thoughts.
We do need to take public comment. Do we have any public comment on this? With that, then, Jennifer, we have a motion and a second to make Mr. Emmanuel chair for the next 1-year term. Could you please call the roll?
Yes. Jim Holton,
Yes.
Cliff Manuel,
Yeah.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman, Rich McLean, Catherine Starkey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Flowers.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Next up is vice chair. We have 1 nomination before the meeting of Commissioner Starkey for the position of vice chair. Is there any other nominations from the floor? Vice chair. If not, I'll take a motion to appoint Commissioner Starkey. Commissioner Flowers has made the motion. Do I have a second? Mr. McLean. Again, public comment? Okay. Is there any further discussion? If not,
This is for when you can't make the meeting. So you better show up.
Jennifer? Jennifer, if you could call the roll?
Yes. Jim Holton,
Yes.
Cliff Manuel.
Yeah.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Rich McLean,
Yes.
Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
Commissioner Flowers. Okay, motion passes. Congratulations.
I don't think you can call Mayor Kreisman.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had Mayor Kreisman.
Yeah. Didn't mean to leave you out. With that, motion passes. Commissioner Starkey will be the vice chair. And then the last position is secretary treasurer. The 1 nomination we have is Commissioner Flowers for the position of secretary treasurer. Are there any other nominations for that position for the 1-year term?
Move approval. Second.
Under discussion, I do want to add that I didn't know you before you joined this board, but from the very first meeting, I was very impressed with you. I'm really glad that you're here with us on this.
Any other discussion? Not any public comment on this item? With that, Jennifer, could you call the roll, please?
Jim Holton,
Yes.
Cliff Manuel.
Yes.
Mayor Castor,
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman,
Yes.
Rich McLean, Commissioner Starkey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Flowers.
Okay, motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Flowers will be the secretary treasurer for the 1-year term. I'll turn the meeting back over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and great election and good new officers and directors. Next up is my chairman's report, and I would just like to thank all of you for putting your faith in me to lead you for these past 4 years. I hope I lived up to the expectations at least a little bit. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve all of you. All of us have had somewhat of a disagreement on how to get where we want to eventually be, but I think we all agree where we need to end up. And that is with a very seamless, environmentally sound and affordable transit system for the whole area, not just Tampa, not just St. Pete, not just Pasco or Hernando County, but for the whole region. And this was kind of summed up to me in one of our early meetings, which we held at Hart. And it brought it home to me in a very special way because I was listening to a young student who had just moved to the Bay Area from Boston, and she was attending the University of South Florida. And she goes, after 3 months here, I absolutely love it here. I want to make this area my home. You guys have wonderful things to do. The only impediment I face is I don't own an automobile. I can't afford one. I don't even know how to drive. And many in my generation don't even want to own a car. So I'd like you guys to really do something that will encourage people like me and others to move here that do not want to be dependent on automobiles to get around. I love your beaches. I love downtown Tampa. I love downtown St. Pete. But it's very difficult for a person of my age to do that.
Yeah.
And this especially resonated with me because I had conversely gone to law school in Boston, and I rode all the great facilities she had up there, the MBTA and the lines and the snow and all that. So it resonated with me. And to me, that's why we're really here, is to deliver a good product for all the people in this area to get around in a seamless way. So as I leave and a great new chair comes in and a great new board, let's keep this woman in mind and others like her and try to deliver for her. That's kind of my parting best wishes and thanks to everyone for a job well done, and let's keep it up.
Very good.
And next up is David, your report.
Thank you. And, Mr. Chair, I would just like to thank you. It has been an honor and a privilege to work with you over the past several years as closely as I have, and just want to thank you for the leadership that you have extended to the agency throughout that time. So first of all, just want to follow up on the regional TDP annual update from last month's meeting. You may recall there was a request to add a reference about sustainability and resiliency due to the priority that the current administration has placed on those things related to transportation projects. So want to let you know that we did add a new bullet as a call to action under the policy recommendation section. The document does need to be submitted to FDOT by September 1st, but we intend to forward it to them next week. Next is the request for a strategic planning workshop. Obviously, there was no time to hold that before the board meeting today, but I am working with Commissioner Long's office on possible dates, which will then pull the board on so we can maximize participation for that. Regarding the joint board meeting between TBARTA and the Regional Planning Council, I met with the executive director from the RPC this week to talk more about that idea. As I mentioned before, he's very open to it, but we'll want to understand the goal of our boards getting together before proposing it to his board. He did say that their board meets the second Monday of each month, and that any joint meeting would need to be on one of those regularly scheduled board meeting dates. And finally, the Regional Transportation Summit. I've had an opportunity to meet with staff from FDOT, the Hillsborough TPO, and PSTA this week to discuss the idea of a forum. And it seems like there are a lot of merits holding an event like that if we can define really clearly what we want to accomplish. There are any number of directions you can go with a regional forum. So the group wants to understand the overall goal in order to come up with possible agenda topics that'll be of interest to elected officials from throughout the entire region. I'm happy to take input on that now, or I can get with Commissioners Starkey and Long, since they seem most interested in the idea of a forum, And then I'll get back with that group that I met with to see how well that matches with feedback that they received. I don't know if there's any input that anybody would want to provide at this point.
Does that conclude your report?
No, I've got a couple of other things, but
Well, the first thing I would want to talk about is the BRT plan. I want the other elected officials in the Tampa Bay area to understand this plan. I think the microtransit is a value to everybody. And then also the other types of transit that are coming, you know, the fixed guideway, the possible partnership with, what's the name of the company that does the air taxi?
Lilium.
Yeah, so
Is your desire to provide updates on TBARTA initiatives specifically, or other transportation initiatives that are going on throughout the region?
well, is it too much to have both, all of that? Do you guys think that's too much? I don't know, Secretary Gwynn, you attend more of these. I mean, I want it to be too big, but
So, yeah, and so yesterday Ming actually came by my office. We were talking. We've been trying to coordinate with the various agencies around the region to come up with a good regional forum. One of the main topics that we were hoping to get into there was the benefits of regional coordination and cooperation, what everyone's role is in a regional transit system, give some opportunities to show examples of systems that have gone from kind of where we are today to a actually functioning and successful system, which we think there's a number around the country. And we've gotten different responses from different TPOs in terms of their wanting to participate or maybe being a little hesitant to participate. We also got a request at the same TIP hearing in June from the Hillsborough TPO. They directed their MPO director to work with us to develop a forum specifically related to commuter rail on CSX tracks. But at this point, we're still trying to coordinate whether that could all be rolled into one, how that should be handled. But we are working with all the local agencies to try to come up with a forum that will be meaningful and that we can get good participation in. Ming, is that anything you wanted to add to that? I know you guys have been carrying the load on coordination.
Thank you, Secretary. As you know, the Secretary is very supportive of transit discussion. And I think there are just lots of discussion in different county on what priority, what needs to be done for us to get there. I think it'll be very valuable to have a meaningful conversation how we can get there and roles and responsibility. I think that is very important. And also when it comes to state funding, need to recognize any major transit project will take support of the entire region for us to get it done. Because you can't just take a couple $100 million and put on one project in one county without support from your surrounding county, because that will impact their ability to do their project. So I think those discussions need to happen. In what format, we try to figure it out. I think, David was part of the meeting, try to figure out what is the perfect platform for the discussion to take place. And we are working with, different TPO and MPO and try to figure it out. And we'd love to hear from this board and your input. What is the best way to do that? To be continued.
If there are no more comments related to that topic, I can continue and finish my report. Next meeting is September 24th, and we are coordinating with FDOT in hopes of having it at the District 7 office in Hillsborough. If for some reason that doesn't work out there, our backup location will again be here at PSTA. In addition to the future meeting topics previously on the list, we're adding an update from FDOT on their SIST plan and also a presentation from the city of Tampa on their mobility as a service project. And unless there are any questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you, David. Any questions for David? None being heard, our final topic is old or new business. Is there any old or new business to come before the board? None being heard, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
And a lot done.
Record to beat, Cliff.